Art is an outlet towards regions which are not ruled by time and space.
The beginning of the 20th century oversaw an era of transition from traditionalism to modernity among social upheaval and discontent throughout the world. Among the individuals that progressed in this era of change was Marcel Duchamp, a man whose artistic ingenuity broke the barriers that chained art to the traditionalist and conformist styles of the past, revolutionizing the meaning of art and what it represented. He insisted that art should be an expression of the mind rather than the eye or the hand, that art should be of living, neither visual nor cerebral. Just as his thoughts ingrained themselves within his works, his pieces redefined the meaning of art as a universal means of expression. The art of creation, the art of concept, the art of life. On July 28, 1887, Marcel Duchamp was born in the city of Longueville, Crevon, Normandy, France. From 1895 to 1905, Duchamp underwent rigorous academic schooling, but soon became interested in Impressionist art and began working on magazine cartoons in Paris. There, he was exposed to numerous styles and forms of art, spending the next few years toying with post-impressionism, fauvism, cubism, abstractionism, and futurism. He slowly began alienating what he considered the materialistic and repetitive nature of magazine art. He began experimenting with his own stylistic approaches to art, breaking free from the impressionist influence of fellow artists. Duchamp's increased fascination with transition, change, movement, and distance began to manifest in his art and experimentations. His 1911 painting, Sad Young Man on a Train, features a young man on a train, but appears to be a conjunction of shapes and colors without a clear picture. In actuality, the sad young man on a train was a direct rejection of art as still pictures. Instead, Duchamp portrayed the idea of movement through distortion and what he dubbed elementary parallelism, laying the foundation for his next monumental piece that broke ideological barriers of perceived art. The Nude Descending a Staircase No. 2 kept the fragmentation and synthesis of Cubist styles, while at the same time utilizing the movement and dynamics of Futurist painting. Never attempted before, Duchamp broke the fourth dimension of painting and the common perception of art as purely a visual portrayal of still matter.
But often when ideas push the boundaries, before they understand, there's a knee-jerk reaction to joke about it or to make fun of it or not accept it. I think because it wasn't traditional. Nude Descending a Staircase depicted a nude, but in some cubist, futurist manner that no one was ready to accept.
Even though it didn't find a home in Paris, the nude achieved international fame at the Armory Show in New York City, where the American audiences were confounded by new avant-garde styles. But not all at the Armory Show were impressed. Despite the widespread positive reception at the show, critics still complained of the nude body.
Well, the Cubists didn't like his painting, the woman going down, the nude descending the staircase. I don't know, it looks pretty cubist to me. It's got the same browns and blacks, right on the same time period, but they said you're not in our club, you know? They said you're probably more like an Italian futurist than like a cubist.
But the success and popularity of the nude furthered Duchamp into ideas of movement, transition, and the manifestation of distance and change. Until now, Duchamp had painted nudes and portraits of post-impressionist and fauvist styles, but wanted something beyond what he deemed retinal art. Art meant to please the eye with stylistic choices. Instead, Duchamp sought to paint at the service of the mind, emphasizing conceptual values over aesthetic appeal. With the idea of emphasizing conceptual value in mind, Duchamp set out experimenting with what he dubbed the ready-mades. Duchamp's ready-mades challenged centuries of artistic ideology and broke the artistic barrier of the superficial adoration of visual aesthetics by using anti-retinal principles. The ready-mades were common objects, and the idea was that an object is a work of art because the artist had decided it as so. So in his studio apartment in 1913, Duchamp unveiled his first ready-made, bicycle wheel, a bike wheel mounted upside down on a kitchen stool. The following year, he furthered his idea when he bought a common mass-produced bottle rack at a department store and proclaimed it as a work of art without altering its form. However, on July 28, 1914, World War I had broken out and brought about an era of drastic change into the 20th century. Duchamp, who was exempt from military service, escaped the war to the United States using the numerous network of connections he made during the Armory Show 2 years prior. 2 years later, in 1916, Duchamp created the Fountain, a urinal he bought from a local plumbing store and signed Armat. A urinal that flushed away traditionalist ideas of art identity, attacking the visual and methodical art that society obsessed over and destroying the romantic ideas behind the process of creating art.
Traditionally, artists spent a lot of time in the studio with their materials or out in plein air with their materials. And the idea that an artist did not have to manufacture or fabricate or create the artwork itself challenged people's ideas as to what art could be.
The fountain demonstrated what would be later known as anti-art, works that directly stripped away the superficiality of art and encouraged artists to portray ideas and concepts in their works, the mental over the retinal. However, before the end of World War I, Duchamp interrupted his work, moving to Buenos Aires and then returning to Paris. In Paris, he stayed with Francis Picabia, a friend and fellow artist who then introduced Duchamp to the emerging Dadaist circles that enveloped post-war Paris, and revolved heavily around satirical, nonsensical productions created with contempt for the past. Acquainted with Dadaist circles, Duchamp would produce his first Dada-inspired piece, LHOOQ.
If you look at LHOOQ, it's the Mona Lisa, which we all know and has been reproduced ad infinitum. And to put a mustache and goatee on this person, it's almost like an act of graffiti in that way, a joke, but also it questions the loftiness or the pedestal onto which this artwork has been placed.
And in 1923, Duchamp unveiled the large glass, but deemed it as incomplete.
And so up above you have the bride with all of the bachelors down below vying for attention and vying for affection. And so in those two spaces, he's playing out competition for affection and attention.
I think it's interesting because it's sculptural, right? It's like built. It's not painted. There's no pigments. It's all like metal and dust. And it's like built very much like a sculpture would be, but it acts like a painting. You know, it's like framed, it has like imagery in it.
The large glass was the ultimate culmination of Duchamp's ready-mades. Nonsensical, humorous, but also possessing a deep symbolism and meaning that was far beyond the superficiality of the piece. After the release of the large glass, Duchamp turned his attention to competitive chess, and it seemed to many that he had given up on art, but he was still involved in numerous surrealist art circles. However, a quiet life in Paris would not last. World War II had begun, France was invaded, and Duchamp was forced to flee to New York. From then on, it would seem Duchamp had completely relegated his life to competitive chess and secluded himself from art circles. Yet for 2 decades, Duchamp secretly worked on his final piece, what he considered the epiphany of his life's work. This was the Étant Donné, instructed by Duchamp himself to remain undiscovered by the world until after his death on October 2nd, 1968. The Étant Donné was an installation incorporating both visual, retinal, physical, architectural, and interactive elements simultaneously. An old wooden door with a single peephole, leading to an elaborate setup of bricks, brass, aluminium sheets, velvet, leaves, twigs, a female form, glass, oil paints, photographic elements, and several ready-mades.
Standing there watching a viewer walk up to the wooden doors and essentially placing their face against the wooden doors to peer inside, they become almost part of a sculpture. And so this goes back to that idea of the viewer completing the artwork. I think that points to the idea of it's about thinking about the artwork and what ideas the artwork makes you think about.
It's unsolvable. Art's not solvable. Maybe like an answer isn't what we're supposed to be looking for. It's just to keep on thinking.
Though Duchamp had passed away, he still lived on in his art. Widely considered as the father of conceptual art, Duchamp served as the starting point for the idea of art as a concept in the 20th century and influenced many later branches of art, such as pop art and contemporary art, and served as an inspiration to artists such as Andy Warhol.
Probablement d'essayer de faire de ma vie elle-même une œuvre d'art, au lieu de passer ma vie à faire des œuvres d'art sous forme de tableaux, sous forme de sculptures.
Through his endeavors from painting to ready-mades to installations, Duchamp set the stage for a new form of art, the art of concept, the art of life.